One of the miracles in my own life is my friend Cynthia Lazaroff. She is doing such heroic work to bring peace on Earth. I have known her since the early 1980s, when we were both active in what we called Track 2 citizen diplomacy efforts and traveled to the Soviet Union together. At my invitation, Cynthia has been stewarding a treasure vase for Russia for several years and building relations, which she is doing anyway, between Russians and Americans on both sides of the Bering Strait, where the vase is dedicated to being planted. She has dedicated her life to Russian-American relations and ending the threat of nuclear war. She's the founder of Women Transforming Our Nuclear Legacy and nuclearwakeupcall.earth. Cynthia Lazaroff is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and the author of Dawn of a New Armageddon, a personal account of the Hawaii missile scare amidst escalating nuclear dangers, published in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. She's convened the Russian-American Women's Dialogue and Peacebuilding Initiative. And the week before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they published a call for peace that was shared all around the world. And now the initiative has been published as another open letter that we're invited to sign and share widely for a ceasefire to the end of the threat of nuclear war. Cynthia might put that link into the chat if you'd like to sign it. We're so honored that you are stewarding a vase for the Bering Strait in Russia and that we finally get to bring you forward, but I'm sorry it's under these conditions. You are serving on the board of the American Committee for U.S.-Russia Accord, and your dedication to catalyzing efforts in U.S.-Russia relations to reduce the nuclear risk and working with people in Russia and in all countries to move towards a world without nuclear weapons is to be truly celebrated. And I hope that tonight we can consider that to be a celebration. Talking to Cynthia in recent days, she's made it abundantly clear that we have never been so close to the possibility of nuclear war as we are today. And so, Cynthia, my sister, I'm so honored to invite you to share your insights and your reflections on the crisis in Ukraine. And I thank you so, so much for being with us tonight on this full moon dedicated to the miraculous.
Well, Cynthia, I'm sharing your emotion, and I will probably be emotional in this circle and in this call. I am doubly honored by being here with you and all. When you asked me to steward the Earth Treasure Vase, it was 3 years ago this summer. We could have never imagined that would be here. And even though things were challenging and difficult, we could have never imagined that. And I have to say that same when the Berlin Wall came down and after the Cold War ended and all of the countries of Eastern Europe became independent, and it seemed like we were finally at peace, that the impossible had happened. We never would have imagined that we would find ourselves in the situation that we're in today. It was unimaginable, completely unimaginable. So I'm just deeply grateful. It feels like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now with you and everyone here, that there's no other place but right here and now. And so that feels really like a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, for whatever reason, as you and I have talked about, Cynthia, I've never been in a full moon meditation with the Global Healing Mandala and you with the Bering Strait Treasure Vase. And there were various times where I kind of wondered, well, when is that going to happen? Or, when is the right moment? And when you called a couple of weeks ago, it was just, oh, this is the moment.
Yeah.
This is it. So this is the moment to open this vase with all of you, and that it's such a sacred day.
Mhm.
And that the intentions for miracles, which is what we need, are amplified, brings me great hope. And that's a theme for me today, as you'll hear. I mean, it's just a theme, holding the faith and the hope.
Mhm.
So I also just want to say where my heart is, and I know that probably everyone on the call I'm not alone, that my heart has been breaking since the invasion. I just, every day it's been breaking. And living in a time where we can actually watch the war unfold in real time on Twitter, which is what I'm on, following journalists and experts, etc. It's just, it's a 24/7 real time experience with the people. And so my heart is breaking. And my heart is with the people of Ukraine, who I just want to bring into the circle as we start, and all the people who are suffering and traumatized by the war. But I want to specifically name those who were wounded, those who are dying, those who are mourning the loss of loved ones, the mothers and children that have been hiding in bomb shelters, sheltering for days, the millions who are fleeing or have fled and who are displaced, often leaving with nothing or almost nothing. My heart is with all of those people, and I want to bring them into this circle because we can hold all of them. My heart is also with the Russian people in Belarus and Russia who have been courageously dissenting and quietly dissenting, people who are risking their lives for speaking the word war or the word invasion, which they've been forbidden from saying without risking arrest and 15 years in prison and perhaps beatings and torture, etc. I also want to bring into this circle one of the hardest things I've heard about, which was a group of mothers of Russian soldiers who came out in the early days of the war, who did not know where their sons were. Their sons were told they were going on a military training exercise. Their sons didn't know where they were going, and the mothers and families didn't know where they were going. And we have been told that the soldiers have had their cell phones taken away. So the mothers don't know where they are, and they all came together courageously and wrote an open letter begging for their sons to come home and for the war to end. So I want to bring them into this circle and just to realize that there's so many people who are suffering beyond those that we see on our mainstream media. There are just so many people. And so I want to just hold, it's really an honor to hold all of those people who are suffering here with all of you, because I don't think it's being done in this way. And so hence we're together again. It's meant to be in this moment for a reason. I also just want to talk a moment about the significance of this beloved Bering Strait vase. And, to remind everyone that the Bering Strait is a place where Russia and the United States are neighbors. It's a place where the border between our two countries is less than 3 miles apart. It's the place where on either side of the strait live indigenous peoples who are members of the same tribe, who used to travel back and forth in boats to see each other, and sometimes still try to do that. And it's also a place where now, because of the melting ice, that has opened up and is a place filled with enormous potential for cooperation and enormous potential for conflict. And we've seen both directions playing out in the last few years in the Bering Strait. So it's a place where, by bringing together the vision of bringing together and working with indigenous peoples on both sides of the strait, where we can come together and hold something larger than all of ourselves for peace. And we can reunite families, and we can put something out to the world that really changes the story and recovers a lost story and reconnects us with a story that was artificially broken when the artificial border went in there. So I want to bring those people into the circle with us now too, who many of whom are not on the call, I don't think, but I know they're here in spirit. And just to set the intention for this vase, which before this war broke out, there was an announcement that the Russian government had decided to open up the Bering Strait this summer, as they are the heads of the Arctic Council, which is a intergovernmental organization that meets to look at cooperation in the Arctic around issues like climate change and other things. And that they actually were going to open it up for indigenous peoples to come together. And I was kind of stunned, because it was something that we had proposed to the foreign ministry of Russia a few years ago, and they had said, we don't know if that's possible, but we think it might be difficult to get the border to open up. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's going to happen now this summer, but the Bering Strait, I think, is a place where that's kind of like an acupuncture point to release the pressure in relations for all the reasons that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. So I want to hold that vision right now with all of you, that's what this is going to do when it's eventually finds its way there. And hopefully that will be in 2023 now. But I just want to hold that intention to, as we open tonight, is that this can hold that possibility for a miracle in releasing the tensions that must be dissolved.
Yeah.
For there to be peace.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll stop with my opening comments and just.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to hear you and feel you and be with you with all that you're holding. And now all of us can hold all of that with you, so you're not holding it all on your own. Okay, so I really want to invite everyone listening to just open wide and take it all in, because we are as big as each other, and together we're strong. We can do this. We can bring it, take it where it needs to go. So, I think, given the educated nature of your experience in this realm, Cynthia, it would be really helpful just briefly to hear from you what you're most concerned about, and the, kind of your assessment of the risk of escalation, even inadvertently, which I think we probably all are aware is right there. But just if you could speak to that just for a moment. We don't need to spend the whole time on that, believe me, but yeah, because you carry this knowledge. So what do you see?
Okay, well, first, what I want to say is that there are two things I'm most concerned about, and I want to start with the people again. I'm most concerned that as we're into now almost the end of the third week of killing, bloodshed, and immense suffering, that my concern is that we need to all come together as one, as you've just mentioned, Cynthia, and hold the vision for a ceasefire.
Mhm.
That vision, my concern is that we're not as one in the world calling for a ceasefire. I want to see that because we need to stop the killing.
Yeah.
We need to stop the bloodshed.
Yeah.
For me, that's just every day that goes on, more people die, obviously, but also the thing that I'm most concerned about as well is the risk of escalation, which you've mentioned and you and I have spoken about. And I fear that every day that the war goes on, in addition to the risk of more people dying and suffering, and that clearly will happen, is that there's a risk of further escalation.
Yeah.
And so I want to just talk a little bit about that risk. I could spend a long time talking about it and go into a lot of detail, but I just want to start by saying that, again, holding with all of you the gravity of the moment we're in, but also the possibility being together of what we can hold, a vision for something different, as we've talked about. So I think what I'd like to do is, in this circle, just witness where we are, kind of from, I'll talk about it a little later, from the balcony, kind of if you look at this conflict, if you go to the balcony as a mediator and you look at what is happening, and just kind of hold that for a second. We're in a moment of extremely high tensions between the US and Russia, but other countries as well now. In many ways, in my view, more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that's for a whole host of reasons that are very different from what it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We have many new destabilizing weapon systems. We've got the risks of cyber attacks. We've got uncertainty around Russia's and NATO's red lines. What are the lines that, if they're crossed, would lead to a further escalation? These are just things that are not entirely clear. It was kind of mostly black and white during the Cuban Missile Crisis, in terms of, we knew that we didn't want the missiles in Cuba, and the Cubans didn't want the Americans to invade, and it was simpler. It wasn't that simple, but there were things happening behind the scenes. But compared to where we are now, it was simpler. There weren't as many what I would call moving parts in this situation. We also, I just want to say, we've had, Putin, as you all know, twice mentioning the risk, the threat of using nuclear weapons, and putting his nuclear deterrent forces on high alert. Again, just holding this together. And then we had a statement from Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov, and this was kind of another signal, another indication. He said that a third world war, should it break out, would be nuclear and devastating. So that was the Russians' way, again, however you interpret it, are they bluffing? Are they, whatever? It is a signal that that their view, if it does escalate to include NATO, which is World War III, if it escalates beyond the parties to the conflict right now of Ukraine and Russia, and some other countries involved in other ways, but in terms of direct engagement in a conflict, that it's World War III. Mm-hmm. And so he's basically said it would be nuclear. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say, it's not alarmist to say that we could be closer to a nuclear war than at any time in our lifetime, those of us who came of age during the Cold War, and that it would be a civilization-ending event, the end of everything we know and love and cherish on this earth. That's what it would mean. There are so many pathways of escalation in this conflict. I was on a call yesterday on a Zoom event with another panelist who is a missile defense expert. And he said to me, as we were preparing for the talk, he said, I think maybe there are an infinite number of pathways. I don't know if it's infinite, but there's so many different variations on what could go wrong here. And I mentioned there were so many moving parts. We've got state and non-state actors in this conflict, which is also different. We've got, for example, people who are not acting directly on the part of the state, calling for world cyber attacks against Russia and inviting independent hackers who are not state actors to hack into, Russia's satellite systems that exist for both military and non-military purposes. And, if that were to happen, the assessment in the expert community is that the Russians in this fog of war would not stop to try to figure out, because it's very hard to determine the origin of a hack like this, whether it's a government or non-government actor. And although the probability would be low that they could be successful, it's not zero. And they would go to it being a state actor, and that could escalate the conflict. That's one of many examples. We've got the risks going on at the nuclear power plants. I just want to bring them into this circle. Two of them are being held by Russian forces. We've had some very strange things happen. We have people working under stress there for weeks now, not getting their shift breaks. We've had
Cynthia.
Yeah, stop.
I'm just going to stop you there and invite us all to take a breath.
Okay.
And another breath. Because the information that you're sharing is incredibly intense.
Okay.
And so let's just come back to each other and to this circle and to the present moment. Having heard enough, I think.
Okay.
We get the idea, and we all know.
Yeah.
We all know that these things are happening, even if we don't know the details. And it's important that we know, but it's important that we take in the information in a way that we can stay present with it and not go under.
Okay.
So just keep breathing. It helps us to put this information into the right place, and not get carried away by our fear. I'm thinking, as you're talking, about Thich Nhat Hanh, who is my great teacher and who has been so much alive for me since his passing recently, and his many, many, many teachings that have come forward about no death, no fear, and how he would say in relationship to conflict, this is because that is. And so we are all in this together. And I'm just wondering if you have anything to offer us, given the seriousness of the situation. And thank you for giving us a glimpse of what that is, of a constructive way that we can hold this conflict.
Yeah, well, I think that, thank you for bringing me back and out of that pathway, reminding me. And thank you for everyone for listening and being present with all of it for this moment. I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier, which is I think that in any conflict, I like to go to the model that the mediator William Ury has put forth, which is that in any conflict, there are often two sides, and each side has its own story, its own history of grievances, its own legitimate concerns, etc. And that there's also in a conflict the third side.
Mm-hmm.
And the third side is us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the community. It's the larger community that can impact a conflict by holding the space for a resolution and by witnessing the conflict and by going to the balcony, as I talked about earlier, and putting ourselves in the shoes of all the parties to the conflict
Mm-hmm.
and holding and listening to their stories, their experiences, their grievances. And it's through that capacity to actually witness things from the balcony and listen to all sides that the most enduring peace agreements are possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would like us to be third sider, invite us all to be third siders in this conflict. And so for me, that means really stepping into the shoes of everyone, as I said. And Cynthia asked me about the roots of the conflict. We were talking about it on the phone last week. And I think that what isn't in the mainstream media is the Russian side of this conflict, their grievances, their concerns. There is a history. I don't want to spend a lot of time going into it. But I think that for this conflict to be resolved, everyone is going to need to come out feeling like they haven't lost. Everyone is going to need to come out feeling like their security is ensured, that the peace will be real and enduring, that they have what they need to make sure that that's going to be the case. There's going to be a lot of, someone just texted me that there are 108 people on the call, a very auspicious number. So I noticed that too. So I just wanted to share that. It distracted me for a second, but I'll just bring it into the circle. That's a beautiful thing. So I just want to invite us all to be third siders. And I would encourage you all to maybe look at William Urey's work on his website, williamury.com, and where he talks about the third side, or watch his TED Talks to see the role that the third side can play in this conflict. But one of the things that I think we as third siders, especially third siders doing this sacred work, this sacred activism work, is we have to hold the vision for peace. We have to hold the vision for a ceasefire.
Mm-hmm.
We have to see it if it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what my Kumu, my Indigenous elder teacher, talks about, is that we have to go to the place where it's already done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think, Cynthia, this might be the moment to bring that in, because it's organic, is that Cynthia and I talked about this, is that, the teaching is, has been to me, go to the beach a couple of 100 years from now, where your grandchildren, your great, 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 great grandchildren are thanking you for abolishing nuclear weapons, for creating a world that's filled with clean air and clean water and, soil that's been restored, and a resilient climate, and, where everything that we envision and dream of is there, that we hold that in the face of the darkness, in this most challenging, darkest moment of, this most, in terms of nuclear risk, etc. Yeah, I feel like it's that we hold the light, and that we affirm what's possible. And for those of us who lived through the Cold War, I grew up hearing that the Berlin Wall was, from the earliest years in my church, in my school, and evening news, the Soviet Union was always going to be the enemy. The Berlin Wall was never going to come down in our lifetime, and we're almost likely going to die in a nuclear war. And we lived to see the world change. We lived to see the impossible become possible. And I think of Nelson Mandela. I've thought of him over and over again. It always seems impossible until it's done. His quote, "It always seems impossible until it's done." That's what we as third siders, taking a transcendent view, can hold for this conflict, with our prayers, with our intentions, with our ceremony. So there's a lot more to say about things, but I think maybe that's enough. I don't know, Cynthia, if there's something more specific in that list that we talked about, I can share more, but that's what's in my heart.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And um, I know you have a lot of suggestions for what you see in terms of how to turn the situation around and what the steps would be. And I feel like to open that door would be to kind of go back down a path that's more political and detailed, that is maybe not what's needed in this moment. Although I think that people would be interested in knowing what that is. So maybe we can share that in the mandala after the call, just to, plant a few more seeds of what we're hoping for. But and what we're holding, in as what did you call them? Third parties?
Third siders.
Third siders. What we're
We're all
holding.
third siders. Yeah, we're all
Yeah,
third
yeah,
siders. Yeah.
yeah. So, and again, as a third sider, it's not about taking sides. And Thich Nhat Hanh is a great model of that. He never took sides during the war. He tried to negotiate peace, and both sides thought he was part of the other, and he was exiled. So he's a model for something here, and to try to make sense of the situation, it requires going to a place that's much bigger than just our little selves. So that's what a meditation like this can do. I think is to strengthen our capacity to see the big picture, and without losing sight of feeling and embodying all those details, but to growing into our best under the circumstances and not succumbing to fear. I know also that you have some sources of information and places where people can go to follow information accurately and send aid and videos to watch. And I'd love to also post those in the mandala. So if you would send that to me, I'd be happy to do that for you and for all of us, because you're a wealth, and we really do want to underline what a wealth you are and what experience you have had over such a long time in these relations. Yeah. So I guess for now, just to say that I'd love to invite you to just pick up that vase that you have and open it up, which we often do after the meditation, but maybe it would be good for it to be open for the meditation, and to invite you to hold it and show it to us. And these are like living beings, and this vase was really needed right now. So we want to pour our hearts into it tonight, and everyone will have the opportunity to direct our prayers for peace into this little treasure vase for Russia that Cynthia is holding. And we'll do that after the guided meditation. So please accept our appreciation, Cynthia, for all you're doing and how much you're holding. And what a stand that you're taking for peace and for understanding. I hope that this little treasure vase, this little living being, can be a vessel of peace for Russia and for the Ukraine and for the whole world as and a source of energy for you as a living treasure vessel to carry on and stay connected.